Well, welcome again to another session of the 15th annual Transforming the Teaching and Learning Environment virtual conference. I'm Bob Hales and I'm your moderator. We have with us today Scott Collins, who's a faculty member in accounting at Penn State Smeal College of Business. Has been teaching accounting courses for like eons, it probably feels like, right, Scott?
Exactly.
Recently transitioned into a more focused role, which involves the direction of upper division courses involving technology and data analytics. Really a hot field. Renee Ford is an instructional designer, also in Penn State Smeal College. He has a background in education, human resource development, and organizational development. Oh, yeah, Renee believes that teaching and learning experiences, when designed well, provide opportunities for students and instructors to participate in excellent, engaging learning experiences. Wow, boy, you're reaching there, aren't you, Renee?
High hopes, aspirational goals.
So our session is transforming the traditional textbook into engaging micro-learning videos. So Scott and Renee, it's all yours.
Awesome. Thank you. So actually the transformative theme of this conference is a really excellent setting for what we're going to be talking about today, because in this presentation, we're hoping to transform a traditional textbook, printed copy type textbook, into something that's hopefully going to accomplish our goal of meeting students where they currently are. More on this later in the presentation, of course. Starting with maybe an expanded intro, I'd like give Renee the chance to fill in any details that she might feel are supplemental to what Bob introduced, and then I'll have one or two thoughts, sharing the perspective, of course, of where we're coming from. So important to understand like what our goal and background is, and that'll help with the presentation. So turn it over to Renee for a moment. I'll take it back from Renee when she's done.
Sure thing. I am an instructional designer with Penn State Smeal College of Business. Been with Smeal for 10.5 years now. And throughout most of my time at Smeal, Scott and I have worked together. My portfolio includes our main focus is online courses, but I have courses that are online, hybrid, and residential, and of all sizes. And so, we see a lot of needs, particularly, as we get into courses with larger numbers, but of courses of all sizes and delivery formats. This session, I think, touches on needs that we see crop up in each of those. And of course, as was mentioned by Bob at the introduction, I also have to look at things with an eye toward accessibility. And so through this process of working on the project, we're also thinking about, okay, well, let's build in from the beginning the accessibility component to this project. So I'll leave it at that for now, and I'll let Scott take it from here.
Excellent. Just supplementing a couple things that I'd like to add on to what Bob had mentioned right up front. I'm a non-tenure line faculty member, so my focus is on teaching. So this project speaks directly to a goal of mine, which is to provide easy, accessible, and affordable materials to students. I'm kind of fed up with the textbook prices that are out there and not really convinced that students are using them for the intended purposes. So in entering into this project with Renee, we're hoping to accomplish a few of those additional goals of ease, accessibility, and affordability. My perspective is that I've taught courses in various formats, in the undergraduate and the graduate format, in the lower division and in the upper division. I think we're speaking mostly to the lower division in this particular presentation. We've got some evidence that we're going to present, anecdotal evidence based on our observations in a large format course. So I've taught in large formats, and I've also taught in what we would call smaller formats at Penn State. And then I've also taught in person, also in the hybrid format of a blended online and in-person format. And also I've taught in the exclusively online, entirely online format. So our perspectives, Renee and I are bringing the perspective of where we have observed and where we would like to take things, where we think things are going, where we think the market's going too. And I think one of the objectives that we're going to try to accomplish today is this project is aiming to meet students where they are and where the market is going. So that's a theme that's going to come out. And I think both Renee and I can speak to that based on our experiences of working together, but also working in the College of Business. So thank you. Here's the objective for today. It's pretty simple. Basically 2 objectives that I have, although there are 4 tiles here. The 2 objectives are, we're first going to talk about the traditional textbooks and our observations about how students are interacting with them. And then we're going to take it one step further and propose a transformation that we feel is going to help bridge the gap of what we feel is a broken system. Pretty simple objectives, but we're going to get there starting with what our observations are about the traditional textbooks. And by traditional, we mean the printed copy textbooks, the bulky textbooks, the expensive ones, the textbooks that are written in a tone that's not very conversational. And even the innovation of a smart textbook has really only, in our opinion, in our observation, incrementally improved the student experience, in that the smart textbooks tend to hone in on what they want the students to read. But there's still a 30-page chapter that's being presented to them, and it's still overwhelming when the students have to pay for the system and when they first log in and look at the system. So even the smart textbooks, we feel, are not quite reaching the mark that we want to reach. And so we're going to be proposing something as a little bit more of a direct application of what the smart textbooks are trying to get at. So hopefully this makes sense. And this is based on our observation of students in a large format course. And so we have about 800 plus students in any given semester. As it turns out, there's more than 1,000 students in the course in the fall semester and about 800 plus in the spring semester. So throughout the year, we're observing close to 2,000 students. And we have observed a few things about the way that students are interacting with traditional textbooks. So based on this observation in a large format course, it's a lower division undergraduate course that we're talking about. The textbook was primarily purchased because it was hooked to and tied to the homework management system that we were using in the course. And so as an instructor in the course and talking to the students about how they're interacting with the materials we're providing them, we observed, and I don't suspect this is much different than what you might have observed in your classes, that the students were using the textbook really as a backup. And they were really trying to reverse engineer the homework management system. They were digging into the homework problems because the homework problems were graded. And they were trying to reverse engineer the textbook relevant portions of the textbook based on what we were lecturing in class and what the homework problems were about. They weren't going through the front door. We wanted them to read the textbook, attend lecture, and then attempt the homework problems. That was the order in which we were proposing that they engaged with our materials. But we found the reverse. We found that the students really went first to the, minimizing time in task and went straight for the homework, the graded component, and then used the textbook as a backup if they couldn't figure it out. But really what they were doing is something different that we were going to present on the next slide. So the textbook generally was not being used for the intended purpose up front. What really was happening is we were observing that students were going out to Professor Internet and doing a Google search and finding resources that way, or conducting a search on YouTube and finding videos that might be related in some way to what we were doing, or to the extent that students have access to the LinkedIn Learning service. This used to be lynda.com before it was purchased by LinkedIn. Penn State provides all of the students with access to the LinkedIn Learning series. And we were finding that when we were chatting with students about how they were interacting with our materials, they were first going to the bottom bullet point on this slide. They were first just conducting some searches to try to find what they were looking for. Whether or not they attended the lecture was sort of an open question. I mean, were they in the lecture? We don't really know. When we asked them, they sometimes admitted that they weren't in the lecture, or they sometimes tried to feign like they were. But we kind of found that they were just interacting with the materials themselves and really straight going to the internet and just basically not looking at the textbook materials. So they were looking for low cost OER type resources. And our observation is generally that that's kind of a waste of student money and time and effort. If we're asking them to buy a textbook that costs in excess of $150, and that's the low end for some of these textbooks, and if we're asking them to engage with the homework management system that's tied to the textbook, we're really just not really servicing them very well if what we're finding is that they're going to outside and external resources. So we feel the system's broken, and it's just based on our observation of what students are doing. I wonder, frequently we're going to try to pause, make sure we're doing all right. I wonder if maybe we've triggered a comment or a thought or a question from any of our audience members that that might be willing to share what their experiences are with the system, and whether or not you're in agreement with whether we think it's broken or not. Feel free to just jump right on audio. I see Tony coming off of mute. Jump in, please.
I'll jump in. I would say yes, yes, and yes to anything you said. And now my daughter she's still in high school, but she's taking a couple college classes. And now I'm actually observing what I was probably theorizing more about. And when she tells me how she's going to get at the information, it's broken. It is broken. And now I have like this new motivation that I want college to improve for my child, not just for my students. And it even gives you like another kind of level of vigor and passion about it. It really is. I'm even things she says, I'm just like, I'll just go Google that, or I don't have to look in the text because I can Google it. Or if it's an open access book and they directly link it, you're just searching through it, hunting and pecking and not getting it in context, and not really like the professor put some really nice PowerPoint slides with an hour and 45-minute lectures. They're not going to read it. They're going to hunt and peck through it to get what they want. And it's going to be, not again in context in that. So I would 110% agree.
Bob, I'm not sure if you were unmuted because you want to jump in with a comment, or if you're just unmuted in general. Please feel free to jump in. I think Bob might be Bob's monitoring.
Yeah. Yeah, I am.
Okay, perfect. Just wanted to make sure that if you had something to add, we didn't want to step on you there. So Tony hit on a couple of points that we're thinking. So is there a better approach? Yes, not hour and 45-minute videos, I'll tell you that. One of the things we're going to present a little bit later in this presentation, we're going to present some evidence to you based on non-peer-reviewed evidence, but anecdotal evidence based on our observation of switching from long videos, hour 15-minute videos, to shorter videos targeting somewhere in the 5 to 10-minute range, although they ended up being on the high end of that. And we're going to present some evidence and anecdotal observations that we've made about how that improved the student experience. But I'll agree wholeheartedly with Tony's assessment that the hour 45-minute videos are not going to be used in the same way that the professor might think they're going to be used. And the long textbooks that are written in non-conversational tone, that are written in academic tone, are really not something that's resonating with students. They're looking for something that's a little bit more light on the terminology. And if there is terminology, that it's well defined before getting into the terminology, or just that the conversation is, or sorry, the tone of the copy is a little bit more conversational in nature, kind of like what they're looking for when they're looking for how-to videos about how to do something. They Google search it first, or they go on YouTube to search for it, and they're looking for a short video that they can watch and just get the gist of what it's about before attempting the how-to thing that they're trying to accomplish. Much in the same way, what we're proposing is this type of approach, more of a curated content type of approach. We're actually proposing to make a textbook out of curated content type videos, short videos, 5-minute target videos, micro learning objectives for those videos, and maybe a problem or two that's backed up immediately afterward. So present a video and ask students to work through a short problem to reinforce their understanding of the video, and the video being the primary type of content with accessibility built in with an ability to print a transcript or a printed copy of the book if needed. So we would have a printed copy available, but the primary means of interacting would be through the short videos. And Renee's dropping something into the chat window to suggest that, we're not asking students to binge watch these long lectures. We even say that in class when we have these long lectures. Look, as you're preparing for the exam, we don't really want you to watch these back to back to back. That's not the objective. But a shorter video series, somebody might be able to prepare for a quiz or an assessment that's limited in the number of learning objectives. If we have these short videos that are available that are targeted at micro learning objectives, perhaps the students can, if they want to to refresh. We would hope that's not the first time they're looking at the material, but maybe a refresh of the material before the quiz or assessment, that they might be able to watch several of these and work through the problems and not feel like they're overwhelmed with a hour-plus video and a 30-page chapter. So what we're asking you to think about in this approach that we're proposing is more of a YouTube curated content kind of approach. But we're talking about in the bottom bullet point here, something that's well produced, not overproduced, but just well enough, scripted as opposed to ad lib, proper lighting, including background kicker lighting, proper sound, including a good microphone. I mean, I have a good Shure microphone that I use for recordings that is a lot better than the microphone that I'm even on right now for this Zoom recording. And we're talking about that, scripted, good sound, proper lighting, post-production editing, a little bit of work going into it, but not overproduction, something that we can do with off-the-shelf programs. I'm using Camtasia, for example, to record these videos and start working on the project. And everything I'm talking about can be completed in that program. There are competitor programs, of course, that would be equally good for that type of production. But I hope that makes sense. And I'm wondering if maybe that helps answer a little bit of what I'm wondering. If maybe we can get Tony back on real quick to say, does this sort of approach maybe address what you and your daughter are looking at and are concerned about? Might this be something that would be a good approach, or are we off base right away? And if we're off base, I don't really have an answer for it right now, but we will certainly take that into consideration. And wondering what Tony might think about this approach.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I definitely, yeah, I think all of this, we just have to reach them, like you said, in a different way. And when you're in online as well, like you were saying, the long verbose textbook doesn't work. You can still pull it off in a classroom. Sometimes, they might not be reading as much, but you can force them, like, let's look in the book. Tell me what it says, little things like that. But you don't have that. So it just doesn't even translate even more so in the, the classroom. But yeah, I think all this sounds great.
So the book that we're talking about, the copy part of the book that would support the videos for anybody who wants it. There are still people who prefer to read as opposed to watch. There are people that need to read as opposed to watch. So from an accessibility standpoint, we still have to have a printed copy textbook. We're talking about micro-learning chapters that are, under 10 pages each. In fact, probably for a micro-learning objective, maybe under 5 pages, 3 to 5 pages each. Bullet pointed, summary, conversational style, getting right at the point of not being overly verbose about what we're saying and just getting to the point of what the objective is, providing anecdotes when we can, making it conversational, providing bullet point summaries, and then getting right into the practice problems that we want people to use as a reinforcement of what's in the text. The videos and the copy, the textbook copy, are being written and shot in that kind of tone and format. So that's the objective here. Small bits, so that we don't overwhelm at all. And what we're thinking is that we're going to be meeting students where they prefer to be, in their preferred medium, something they can access on their phone on the way into school if they're riding a bus or taking a ride share if they want to knock it out on the way in, something they can watch or listen to in breaks that they have between classes and during lunch, something that doesn't take too long for them to complete in the evening before they tend to other matters. So meeting students where they are, making sure it's accessible on various formatted devices. So obviously a computer or laptop, but then also making it accessible on the smaller devices like tablets and phones. Shorter length of content, matching our shorter attention spans. Definitely mimicking the how-to approach that we're seeing people look up on YouTube for just about anything they want to accomplish. And then that bottom bullet point, the emphasis on conversational writing and conversational speaking. Even in a script, it's pretty easy. If you're well versed in script writing, it's pretty easy to write a script in the same way that you would speak. So you can be scripted and still sound conversational without having to ad lib and have a lot of hiccups in the video. So well-produced videos, but not overly produced, is what we're talking about. Let me give you a few examples of what we're talking about. I'm not going to play the entire videos, although when we have access to the slides, I'm sure that Bob will, through Bob, we can get the slides posted for accessibility. And if you want to take a look at these example videos in complete, feel free to do so. But what I'm going to do here, with your permission, is share a few moments of each of these videos just to show you kind of what we're talking about. These are not our videos. These are examples of what we're accomplishing as we're starting to get into the script writing and what we're aiming for. So bear with me just a moment while I share just a few moments of each of those 3 videos that we're talking about.
When you want to provide instructions to a computer, you use what's called a programming language. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of programming languages available, each made up of its own syntax or rules and semantics or meaning. Let me give you an analogy. In English, we would write welcome and use 1 exclamation mark. But in Spanish, we would write bienvenido. Semantically, they mean the same thing.
So as an example, what we're showing you is somebody in front of a nice backdrop, a decently presented desk and backdrop, proper lighting in the room, somebody speaking right to the camera in a casual conversational tone, and also providing some produced content. We've got, lower thirds options in Camtasia. We've got the option to bring in video that's of a slide type nature, a little bit of movement in the video. So it's not just somebody speaking purely in front of the camera. Here's another quick example of what we're aiming at.
We use iteration in programming all the time. In Python, you can create a loop using the for keyword. In the start file for this video, I have a list called spices that stores the names of 4 spices I like to use when making omelets. To print the contents of my list, I can use a for loop. Let's try it out.
So the example here is being able to provide a demonstration, a follow me type demonstration, and having the ability to transition back and forth between the presenter's view and the screen view, or even, as I had showed just a moment ago, we have an overhead camera that we can present if we're showing something on paper. So just the ability to have a curated content style that transitions back and forth between the speaking and the watching, and maybe the demonstrating and the following. And then last, just a quick example here.
Have you ever heard the phrase garbage in, garbage out? It means that your results are only as good as the data you use to generate them. So always consider the reliability and validity of your source. Validity refers to how well a tool used measures what it's supposed to measure. Reliability refers to how consistent results are over time.
And so the example here is talking about, again, a presenter. I think this presentation appears to be in front of a green screen. I can't tell if that's a live background or a green screen background, but we have a green screen that we can record against. And so that would be another option for presenting. And then again, we have movement in the sense that we're transitioning in and out of not just watching a speaker the entire time, but actually presenting something in a slide format and then coming back to the speaker. That's what we're really trying to accomplish here, is movement, something that's interesting, something that's curated, something that the students are used to seeing in where they are right now, which is searching for YouTube and LinkedIn Learning type presentations. I hope this makes sense. And I'm wondering if maybe I can just get a little bit of feedback from somebody in the audience to see if maybe if this objective is okay, or if maybe we're missing the mark on this and we're missing something. Just wonder if maybe we can get a little bit of feedback from one or more folks in the audience on this.
Well, myself, for one thing, having a bachelor's in TV production, the advantage for this is that you can work on it and make it perfect, right? You can make sure you didn't forget something or you poorly explain something. You can get it so it's right, and it's reusable. And unless something has changed, like in accounting, if 2 + 2 is no longer 4, then you can make the change. Otherwise, you can keep using this. So that's a time saver as a faculty member. Then you put it together, it's there. I can focus on something else.
What's interesting about what Bob just said is it's reusable, yes, to the extent that the content doesn't change. Now, the topic that I'm talking about, more of a data analytics topic set. Doesn't change that much, although there are components of the course that would change based on the current technology that's being used. So the innovation would be, there's a lot of upfront work in recording the static topics. And then occasionally, as we need to, we could update modules. This is a modular format that we're proposing. So we could update modules as needed on the new technology and replace one with another. There is some work. It's important to understand that this is not without work on the part of the production team, and I would be a primary member, and Renee would be a primary member of the production team in this case. But what we're proposing to use is off-the-shelf programs. So we're not trying to overproduce it necessarily. Things that would be with a little bit of learning about how to use the off-the-shelf programs, things that are easy to shoot in a video format, in a screen capture format, things that are easy to produce in a post-production setting to add lower thirds and titles, to add those transitions into the slide-oriented presentation. And then really what it's about is making sure that the production value is good enough so that if you're using a good camera, you've got a good background, you have good lighting, you have good sound, making sure those are there. We have some help. We're fortunate, and we have some help at the business school. Renee can speak about this a little bit more as well. But we have a recording room. We have a production facility inside the business school where we have good cameras and good lighting and good sound, and a green screen backdrop that we can then add in a nice background if we so choose to do to take that approach. My proposal, in addition to that, is to simply record in the office and get a good backdrop in the office and good lighting and good sound. And I have those materials in my office as well. So what Bob is saying is really correct. A lot of upfront work, but then reusable, and we can amortize that work over several semesters, not to replace the classroom. That's not the objective here. We're not trying to replace the classroom sessions, just trying to supplement it as a textbook that students would actually take advantage of and use in a video format as opposed to a printed copy format. Bob, I appreciate that comment. Thank you very much. So the objective here is really to, not to just recreate the LinkedIn Learning videos. I mean, we could simply just be using the LinkedIn Learning videos if we wanted to find the learning objectives in those videos. But what we're talking about is micro learning objectives, customizing it for our class. And in doing so, making the videos short, keeping them under 5 minutes, recording our own videos with our specific learning objectives and with our specific anecdotes and data that we're going to be using in the course. So there is a need for us to customize it as opposed to use the stuff that's out there. But our objective is to record in a same type of tone, same type of conversational writing style and speaking style, and also with a very focused micro-learning objective based on what we're doing, so that we're not asking students to watch a 10-minute video and then only find the 3 minutes of it that matter to our course. Focused, short, effective is what we're hoping. With that, what I'm going to do is turn things over to Renee for a few slides, and then I'll take things over from her in a little bit. So flipping over to the next slide and allowing Renee to take the lead here.
Sure thing. And so we'll also get another square on our Zoom bingo, because I'll start saying next slide whenever it's time to switch. But we took some time taking the data available. Our backend system for our videos is Kaltura at Smeel and at Penn State. We also have a streaming server, but the videos for the purposes of this were already in Kaltura. And so we've taken some courses, including the larger enrollment course that Scott spoke to, and done some analysis of the, how much are students watching. And really, if I'm to be completely honest with you, because there's a team teaching approach to the course that we're speaking of, and I, as an instructional designer, was cringing at the fact that there were 50-minute long videos in the course, and I wanted to find a reason to get the instructors to redo their videos, to make shorter videos, because the original faculty member, his vision, and this was many years ago, was to emulate the classroom experience, and so to have a video that was the length of the full classroom experience. And so we crunched some numbers, and the precursor number crunching was to show, what percentage of the videos were students watching with the larger, longer videos. And then after we implemented the change of shorter videos covering the same content, goal of, 5 to 7 minutes at most, not that all of them hit that mark, some were shorter, many were more in the 10 to 12 minute range. As you can see, the average course video was 10 to 11 minutes in length. What we found was what you find with any video usage analysis, the hotspots, right? Students watch at the beginning, they watch in the middle, they watch in the end. We all do this when we find ourselves in student roles. Hopefully, at least we watch the beginning, middle, and end. But what happened as we made shorter videos that covered the same content was, yes, students were watching beginning, middle, and end, but the overall percentage watched of the content increased. And so I just want you to hear that as we think about translating that into a video-based textbook model, is that we can first stitch together all of the content in one place, so it becomes a landing page, but also create the resources around the course content that will be in a format that is designed from the outset to increase student engagement and actually get them to use the resources available in the course instead of going to external sources that are either free or for pay that may or may not support their learning needs. And so let's go to the next slide. So when we looked at the average percentage of video viewed before they close the video, then you can look at if the video is less than 3 minutes, 71% watch the video before closing. Greater than 3 minutes but less than 20, 51%. And if it's 20 or more minutes, 29%. We thought that we would pull out because we thought, well, surely exam related videos, they're going to have more of the students' attention. But a lot of those were longer videos because they would have review sessions on basically all the concepts. And if it was less than 20 minutes, 39% would watch those. So a little bit more for the course content, which surprised me, than the exam related content. So that's just an interesting aha moment. That was the exact opposite of what we expected. Let's go to the next slide. So average 10 to 11 minute videos. Students watched a higher percentage of the shorter videos as compared to the longer videos. And as the students' cumulative watch time was, the cumulative watch time for students was higher for shorter videos, even if they equaled the same length total when you added up the various separate video components. So we know that if we want to get students to watch more content, and if it's important, which you wouldn't be making videos and putting the resources into deploying them if it were not important, that we've got to make some changes to that side of things. So from the beginning, this project is designed to keep that in mind. And let's go to the next slide.
I'm going to take back from Renee for just a couple of slides here. I'd like to make a couple of points just to emphasize what Renee said on this previous slide. This right here is where we are. We had an average of 10 to 11 minutes in our shorter videos. And what I mean by that is Renee mentioned that we had 50-minute videos prior to this transition. And we made a change in our video series, and the average of the new videos ended up being somewhere in the 10 to 11 minute range. But we saw a higher percentage completion rate. And as Renee said, 5 10-minute videos versus one 50-minute video, students watched longer in the 5 videos that were 10 to 11 minutes each. Their cumulative watch time was higher than if it had been in just a one video at 50 minutes length video. It's a really important point to make. And I want to go back to this graph and say, this is where we were right in here, somewhere close to 50%, just over 50% watch time for the shorter videos, 10 to 11, compared with where we were before in the, 1 hour plus, or even the 50 to 59 minute range where we had like a 30% watch rate. So we increased significantly the percent of videos that students were watching by just chopping them up into smaller learning objectives. Here's where we want to be. So in our project that we're proposing here, we're going to try to hit the 3 to 5 minute range. And, although that data is based on our 800 plus student large enrollment course, we're expecting to see another significant increase over the 10 to 11 minute videos. If we chop those videos up into micro learning objectives, we're expecting a higher percent watch rate. And by default, we're also expecting a higher cumulative watch rate, both of which are good, because our objective is to get students to interact with the materials and not ditch the materials and go elsewhere to find what they need. So we're hoping that they're going to utilize the materials we're presenting if we can present it in the format that is shorter. And cumulatively speaking, we're hoping that they're going to be watching more of the videos. Renee, I hope that's okay as a supplement to what you were saying. I'm going to turn things over to Renee here in a couple of slides, but let me jump into some performance measures that we were talking about. So as a setup for the performance slide that we're going to talk about, we also analyzed, how did students perform on assessments? And in the course that we were speaking about, it's important, this second bullet point, it's really important to emphasize that exam assessments were the overwhelming majority of the grade. It's a large format course. We can't really hand grade things in a class of 800 or 1,000 students. So exams at a testing center, that's the format we were using. Very traditional, very, yes, it is a very, stressful environment as well for the students. And simultaneously, so we weren't really trying to just measure this. We weren't setting up the change in the videos with a research mindset. We also added the innovation of changing our test bank. So while we were changing to a different video format, we changed the way that we tested the students in terms of what types of questions we were asking in the test bank. So we had a couple of levers that we were pulling at the same time. So from a research standpoint, it was a little bit more challenging to isolate changes in the assessments. So what we did was we focused. The next slide, I'm going to present our findings, but we focused on the questions that were similar in the newer test bank when we changed the video format. We focused on the questions that were similar versus as compared to the old test bank. So we tried to find as close to a one-to-one comparison as possible. In fact, they were the same learning objectives. They were tested in a similar way. We just had different questions to keep things fresh. So we focused on those questions that were similar in the new bank. And what we found was only a nominal increase. However, because we had such a large N number of observations, it was a statistically significant increase, just because any small increase in a large N ends up being statistically significant. And so we did find a nominal increase, but we didn't find a decrease. I think we were really happy to learn that we didn't see a decrease. Now, what's interesting about this is, combined with the new test bank, we were actually quite pleased by the increase in the average performance on the exams, because absent the change in the videos, when we've changed our test bank in the past, we've seen a general decrease in the performance on the exam, probably because there's a sawtooth effect of, the exam questions and content kind of being out there, whether it's word of mouth or whether students are sharing it online. Just the fact that we're using a big test bank, but the same test bank semester on semester, the longer we use that test bank, the higher the exam average tends to get. And we see that sawtooth effect when we change the test bank, that the exam averages jump back down. So we were really pleased by the fact that there was a nominal increase in the average performance on the exams for the similar questions, because we were otherwise, absent that video change, we were otherwise expecting the test bank average to decrease just because it was a new test bank. So this is a win for us, the fact that there was an increase in the student performance. And absent any other unforeseen factors. Anecdotally and not peer reviewed, we're attributing this mostly to the fact that we changed the videos and made them shorter, and we noticed that students were interacting with the materials more directly and for a longer period of time. And because we're testing based on what was in those videos, the fact that students weren't going outside to external resources and essentially wasting their time with videos that were not directly attributed to our learning objective or tied to the learning objective, and certainly not tested in the same way they're being presented online, we felt we were doing students a service, and we proved that at least we didn't do them a disservice in this case. So while it's a little bit counterintuitive, and while conventional wisdom might think the other way, we were really pleased with these results. And then a couple of trends that we want to present. I'm going to give this back to Renee to talk about the last couple of slides and trends and teachable moments. So back to Renee.
Okay, so even if you're not going to be launching a video textbook project, some takeaways that can be applied to teaching and learning and instructional design are these. It's important to keep videos short. Our average length for videos was 10 to 11 minutes. I would argue that it should have been shorter, and we might have seen better results. It is hard. It's always attributed to Mark Twain, but if I'd have had more time, I'd have written less. I get that. But shorter is better. But recognizing that certain things might take a little bit more time to get to the end result. So don't make it shorter for the sake of being short, but find that balance. Learners in this day and age, and this is a hard one for me, I don't like learning by video. So he realized that I'm advocating a design method that for my personal learning style, it's not my favorite, but you don't have to look far to realize that increased numbers of videos are expected from our learners, especially post-COVID. Online courses do tend to require more instructional videos than face-to-face courses for a couple of reasons, not just to show the content or the how-tos of doing the course, but because students need to make that personal connection with their instructor and feel like they're part of a learning community, not just out there on their own without a real person in the helm. And that supports what happens behind the scenes in the courses. The cost of producing instructional videos is still relatively high. We all know that we can get on Zoom and we can create our videos. I'm not talking about that portion of it. That has decreased significantly because the tools are more accessible, more user-friendly. But we can't put a video up without captions. We can't put a video up without making sure that if there are PowerPoint slides that have images or graphs, that those aren't remediated for accessibility so that any student can interact with the course content. So even if you can get the cost of making a video close to free, which if we're talking about the quality level that Scott was mentioning, then you still at least have to have decent software, decent equipment, and or a studio like what we have at SMEO. We have two studios, actually. One is a traditional green screen studio with typical production resources available in it. Then there's also we have a Lightboard studio that faculty can use as well. And not a lot of research has been done to determine the return on investment of instructional videos. That doesn't mean it's the wrong thing to do, but I would argue that if you want to be relevant and be designing courses that are formatted to meet the needs of current learners and future learners, then we need to be doing a little bit more with video, because they're not reading the text. We're not reading the text if we don't have to. If we get compliance training, let's be honest, we're like, how can we pass? So finding ways to draw the learner in and engage is important. Let's go to the next slide. The learner experience is key. And they've spoken, so to speak, maybe not by our course evaluations or that sort of a thing, but we see what the trends are in industry. We see what the trends are with what's going on in the world around us. And so why not leverage those resources to increase student engagement and improve learning outcomes? Videos need to be perceived as important to student outcomes. They're not just going to watch a video because it's busy work. It has to matter to them. The length does affect how much students watch. We've covered that. Now, here's the thing I want to say, and this is going to sound potentially counter to some of the other things that we said, but there is a tipping point. You know, the production quality has to be good enough, but it doesn't have to be a Corpu video with all the bells and shiny whistles. Well, maybe they're not around anymore. I don't know, but it doesn't have to be super polished. If there are buzzes and distracting things, that's gonna, people are not gonna have a high tolerance for that. But good enough really is good enough. And so focus on what's essential, what are your objectives, and know that even the video that we're recording right now, you know, if somebody wants to learn about this topic, you know, they're gonna watch the video. It's a Zoom video. We're not in a studio, but good enough is good enough. It is Zoom has created a product where we have high quality video outcome, video quality, excuse me, and so, you know, find that balance. And you don't want something that looks unprofessional or half put together, but you don't have to invest tens of thousands of dollars to do a project like this. And I will say that captions aren't just for students with disabilities. Students like me who don't like watching videos, I'm going to look at the captions and I'm going to speed read the captions and then go to the points in the video where I want to look. So there are a lot of use cases, and there's a lot of rationale for making sure that we're attentive to including captions. And even on this presentation, the captions are enabled. They're machine generated. They're about 80% accurate, probably. I have a deaf family member who I sometimes use Zoom with. It's pretty good. It's not perfect, but at least we're acknowledging that we're trying to make the learning accessible for all. Next slide.
Quick comment before flipping to the next slide, just dovetailing on something that Renee said, sound is really important. So in the production quality, something with bad sound, a video with bad sound is going to get skipped. When I'm searching in YouTube and somebody's sound is terrible, that's a quick skip. It's an ugh, oh, I don't want to listen to that. So in production quality, sometimes good enough is good enough, but making sure that the sound is there is really important. So.
Yeah, that's one of the distractors that will make people disengage and just drop off quickly, because it's, you know, like nails on a chalkboard for them. All right, keep videos short and meaningful. Test the videos on multiple devices. I can't stress this enough. You might think that it works because you're using it on your device, on your favorite browser, but check all the browsers. If you're a Mac or an OS user, iOS user, then check it on a Windows, check it on mobile device, all the things, right? I'd recommend not relying on auto captions. When possible, use a human captioning service. I know that they're getting better all the time, but at the very least, if you're using auto captions, you might want to check your transcript. Sometimes some really wild things come out in the auto captions, and we use those for our live sessions and our online courses. And I just spot check them because there have been a few doozies that could have gotten us into trouble. So especially depending on a person's cadence and accent. Make sure you provide the accompanying files. This is particularly important for a discipline like accounting or analytics, where they're needing to use formulas and to you know, engage with, maybe there's an Excel worksheet sort of embedded in, or a chart or something like that. It's really equitable to include those files so that they can access them, not just the visuals, but the actual file itself, if your instructor is agreeable to that. Provide transcripts whenever possible. It is a good idea to build that connection, especially in a completely asynchronous course or an online asynchronous course. for instructors to show their faces. Not all of our instructors are excited about that, so that they know they know what you look like, right? They know that you're a real person, and they can feel that connection. And we've got these tools that provide analytics both within learning management systems and within the video platforms that we use. I'd encourage you to take a look at them. It can give you some information to help guide what you're doing with course design, and to make sure that you're utilizing your resources to the best ability that you can, because we know that, in these times, a lot of cuts are being made to budgets and that sort of thing. So make sure that you're targeting your design to have the greatest return on the investment. And with that, I think we have
This is a way to get in touch with us if you'd like to engage with us. The QR codes go to our LinkedIn pages, and the email addresses are directly reachable to us. I'd like to thank everybody for being here. Hopefully this was something that you were able to get a few nuggets out of, you can take back, and something valuable to think about. So thank you, Bob, for inviting us, and thank you everybody for attending.
Well, thank you. I would argue that you maybe even want to cut those 10 to 11 minute videos in half. You know,
That's the target. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the argument I make.
3 to 5 minutes, Bob. That's our target.
yeah, because I've said this, students standing in line somewhere will watch videos of that length, and that's what they do. And that's a good way to reach them. Plus, it forces you to really streamline your content and make it essential what you tell them. No fluff or anything to that, would confuse them, but nice streamlined content. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, 3 to 5 minutes is our target. If we can do that, according to the data that we gathered from the large course, we might be hitting 75% plus in terms of the watch rate for any individual video. So we're really hoping that would be effective.
And I think you touch on something important, Bob. We're also in a place, and we didn't talk about this, and it wasn't the point of this presentation, but students are learning in those interstitial spaces. They're learning when they're walking from point A to point B. They're learning when they're riding on the bus from or to class, or hopefully they're not learning when they're driving, but it could be happening. I've heard of it happening with our students. And so considering that, especially in the age of the podcast, I mean, that's obviously a hugely growing market. And so we have to consider, when and where are students accessing the information. And that goes back to also checking on the different devices, because even though we can say you have to do this on your desktop, they're still going to try to do it. Why wouldn't they use on their mobile devices? They're with them all the time. Let's leverage that.
Tony, jump in.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I more or less agree with that about the video length, and we all have that. Even when I go on YouTube, I look for the shorter ones. But I do also think that you could have a different view of that when you look at the video watching in combination with the practice. So what really matters is having something at stake in watching the video. And I do agree, if you just put up an hour and whatever minute video, not only are they not watching it just because of what we know about people's habits, but they can hunt and peck for what's at stake. And I think that you have to keep the practice part. That's what really makes this micro lesson work, is thinking about it as a unit, the video and the practice. And so I use this my background was actually philosophy, and I use this with deductive logic. I try to make micro videos to go with the practice of the homework, but I also try not to over obsess about the length. If I'm keeping it under, even if I'm keeping it under 10 minutes, because I don't want to lose the baby with the bathwater, but if in the next practice homework, there's something really at stake, well, then keep going back and forth and use what you need in that video, as long as you get, what you need. yeah, like I'm just a big believer in practice and even in philosophy with concepts. I've figured out, especially in 100, 200 level ways of applying the concepts. And when you keep that in mind, then you can be a little less
Mm.
obsessed about this isn't under 5 minutes or how can I get under 5 minutes? Because you are busy also with other things. So
And you can
it's
even
another-
chunk you can index those videos when it needs to be a little bit longer so that
Sure.
students can see
Yeah.
what's in there and how to
Nope.
jump to.
One of the
Yeah.
really cool things about setting up a video in a YouTube type format is, Tony, actually, by the way, the objective here in the 3 to 5 minute videos in an accounting setting is to include an example at the end of the video. So here we've been talking about something, let's work through a simple example, but we can
Right.
index it in the scroll bar for the video and show them what part is going to be the start of the example. And so both of those can be achieved the goal is 3 to 5 minutes, but including a short example, if that makes sense. I hope that
Well,
would
And you could
Vicky.
tie that even in further. You had shown the example, you go through your text or your example, and then you have them do the example right there. You know, and I've seen that in programming classes. You know, there's a class that's taught on Python, and basically they show you the code. This is how you do it now, and you can't go on until you get that code right, you know, or something like that. So as Tony's talking about, it all goes together, you know, because micro lessons I have found are much more effective if they have, you know, something that they have to do at that point in time, or, you know, it builds on itself. So
That's really good feedback coming from both Vicky and Tony. Thank you both. Bob, I hope we're not taking too much time from everybody and getting to the next session. I really appreciate the conversation that we were having here.
Hey, this is good, and really appreciate you two taking your time to do this for us, and it sparked a good discussion. So
Well, more conversation needed. We're hoping. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.